Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello everyone and welcome along to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Ciarán Whelan and Tomás Ó Sé are with me to look ahead to the All-Ireland Football semi-final weekend. Kerry-Tyrone and Donegal, Meath. And let's start with Kerry, Tomás, because I think for a lot of people, we were sort of waiting for this team to ignite. Suddenly they have shown us that they can do that. And now they seem to be the form team all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's funny, Jacqui. Like I before the game the last day, when they couldn't or didn't start Paul Ganey or Paddy Clifford, I think Paddy Clifford was the big one that Kerry people thought would start because he came on against Cavan and Killarney for 20-25 minutes, and I think that was the concern, that they possibly would have had to start with a second string midfield as well, and which turned out actually that they put Joe O'Connor to wing forward and started Mark Ó Sé and Sean O'Brien at midfield. And to be fair to the two lads, they competed. Armagh actually didn't go way too long, but anything that came their way, they smashed, they tackled, they crashed into fellas, they worked extremely hard. Kerry got under breaks, and I think everybody's talking about that 15 minutes maybe in the second half where nobody, I think Armagh will look back themselves and say how they didn't get, I think they got 3 kickouts off out of about 15. But even in those 3 that they got out, they went up the field and they didn't score. And it was just a great performance by Kerry in terms of what is the word, efficiency. They're just very accurate. They don't waste ball. They were clinical. And for me personally, it wasn't just the David Cliffords of it. It was, you had Micheál Burns who came on, had a huge impact. You had Gavin White who was outstanding. You had Brian Begley who was outstanding. The lads around the middle of the park. Sean Ó Sé set the I suppose the standard for everybody. But now the big question is, can they back what's just after happening there? Will that bounce bring them in against a Tyrone team who on the surface you'd say aren't going as well? But if there's one thing about Tyrone footballers, they'll always rise it against Kerry. And I think the nature of the new rules, Jacqui, you can't say just because they did so well here the last day that it's going to happen the same way. And it seems to be that whoever's dominating around the middle of the field in the last few games are getting shots off up the other end. So, and even on that, the 2 lads on the inside, full forward for Tyrone, weren't hectic the last night. There's probably room for them to improve as well. So I think Kerry people are really excited for it. I think the opposition is right and they're looking forward to the weekend, I would say.
They should be though, Ciarán, shouldn't they? Because of all the things that they've shown us that Tomás has outlined.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, I suppose there's that expectation in Kerry, that the players have to deal with, that there's an expectation that they bring Sam home every year. So they've got to be excited about it. But I think going back to what Tomás says is like, it's really where are the real Kerry at, I suppose, is probably the question mark. And probably the narrative that's out there is that, this is similar to 2009. Kerry they were being kicked around and probably written off by their own. And there was, they're all kind of maybe having a go at each other, which is a great thing. And then they arrive in Croke Park and blitz Armagh, and that is what ignites them to drive for Sam. But as Tomás said, there's a bigger probably question mark this weekend now, whether they can replicate that level of performance, whether they'll have that edge that they certainly had. They arrived in Croke Park, wound up, no doubt about it, and were determined to prove a point, I'd say, collectively, even with all the injuries they had. My question, the only thing I question about them is, while the performance was unbelievable, the question where Armagh were at as well, and looking back on it, and Jacqui, we would have spoke previously about the amount of chances Armagh gave Dublin. They gave Dublin 36, 37 shooting opportunities, and they were easy shooting opportunities. And even from going back to that first game against Antrim, where they conceded 5-6 2-pointers, in the space they left Kerry, I would say Kerry in that first half couldn't believe the lack of heat that were on them. They had the ball out between the midfield area and the arc. They were allowed There was no pressure on them, no heat on them. They were allowed to look up. They were allowed to pick pockets inside. They were allowed to get shots off outside the arc. And I think Armagh they'll look back on that video and reflect and think they were way off it. So I think for me there was two things in the game that really won the game for Kerry. Was that first half where they were able to pick off those easy scores. And then the second half when they got that squeeze and Rafferty had a couple of bad kickouts and then he tried to use the sidelines. And I think Kerry were very, very tuned into that, in terms of, that Andrew Morning sideline kick where they were getting two bodies over to put a squeeze on them. And I think it was about the eighth kick out, Tomás, when there was eighth kick out when Rafferty decided to actually go long down the middle and they lost that one as well. And the thing about it is if you give, over the years, if you give Kerry the football and you give them possession and they get enough possession in the game, they're going to hurt you. And this team has the ability, similar to the team back in the noughties, where, if you lose that momentum for a 10, 15 minute period, you can concede. And with the new game, with the new rules now, you can concede 9, 10 points and they can blow a team out of the water. But I think this weekend is I think Tyrone are arriving in with, as Tomás said, they didn't massively perform well against Dublin, but they beat Dublin. And I think they'll approach the game in a different way. I think defensively, I think there'll be more man-to-man approach. They will definitely tag some of Kerry's key players. That's easier said than done. I don't know whether Geeney's going to be back, Tomás. I think if he's back, it adds a different dimension into the forward line because he was flying right up to that. But I just think Tyrone they're going to improve as well, and they're going to relish this opportunity to try and stifle that Kerry narrative. And listen, we're in for a cracker. We're in for a cracker, I think.
For sure. Is it a different picture with Morgan and the way that he's going to challenge those kickouts, Tomás? Because Ciarán is right. Like, Kerry got so much fruit from Armagh. I just wonder, is it a completely different picture with Niall Morgan there?
Yeah, I think there was an awful amount made. I would have had Rafferty down as one of the top keepers in the country, Jacqui. I'm wondering why, with the physicality that Armagh had around the middle of the park, he kept trying the three-quarter kick out. He kept going for those, and he's been excellent at them. He backed himself, but I think Kerry, as Whelan explained there, they just had bodies in the spaces where he wanted to hit his normal three-quarter kick, and he didn't go long enough, often enough, if that makes sense. And I think Niall Morgan will. I think he's well capable of booming it over the top. Now, the problem with that is you can't, like, Kerry are going to have bodies out there as well. So if he booms it long, then Tyrone have to win it. They have to win it. And if they do win that, and if they spook Kerry a couple of times, then Kerry mightn't get as aggressive with the press on it. So it'll be interesting what they do in the kick out. I don't expect... And look, Kerry showed their hand in so many areas. They showed the individualism of Tomás Ó Sé, if he's allowed to go on his own, what he can do. Paddy, when he came in, handled as much ball as some of the lads that played a full match in the second half. You had Gavin White, who was bombing forward all day. So they've showed what they can do when they press effectively on a kick out. They have proven that the two lads middle of the field, there might be a second-rate midfield with Diarmuid O'Connor and Barry Dan O'Sullivan out injured, but they're still very, very effective. So Tyrone have had 2 weeks to really prepare and make sure that, they have plan A and plan B with kickouts if they're squeezed on it. But I'd imagine Kerry will go gung-ho. If they're after cracking Rafferty, then they'll try to crack this fella as well. No, it's the same way as flip it, Jacqui, and it's the same thing the other way. I think we don't mention another thing there as well. They'll have to go man-a-man. They'll have to go man-a-man on Shawnee. They'll have to go man-a-man on Paddy. They'll have to go man-a-man on David Clifford. Hampsey hasn't done badly on David Clifford in the past, and I'd expect him to pick him up. Conor Myler used to always pick up Paddy Clifford, and I don't know. You see, he's only back from injury, so I don't know will they risk it. So there's a big question for them straight away then. If you're going man-on-man, this is what... Look, I don't know, can you say Armagh threw the dice and dropped a man back, and the lack of intensity out around the fellas who were breaking lines and who were kicking from distance was poor for Armagh. So if they go man on man, they're going to have to be really, really tuned in. But you know what? That's what Tyrone have been brilliant at. in the last number of years is when ball comes in, they just harry, chase, hunt in packs. There always seems to be an extra man. But I think Kerry are sharpening as they go along and are getting better as they go along, and the confidence is high within the camp. Their bench had a good impact. Like Tyrone's bench, Owen McElhone, I've seen him in close quarters with the 20s last number of years. He's a good player. He came on the last day. Is he worth starting?
Yeah. The point he scored the last day taking on Kilkenny, he eyed him up and he said, I'm a young lad, you're here a while and I'm going to show you that I've arrived. And he just burnt him, And he
did the same against Armagh, the championship above. He came on and he plays without fear. He plays with a good cockiness. And there's a decision there for Malachy O'Rourke. Does he start him or does he bring him in? I'd start him. I think he's good enough. I think he's strong enough. He's confident enough, and he's got the skills and he has the pace. He's fearless. So there's a decision there, but it's going to be brilliant because Kerry will also have to pick up their inside men. And if McElhone actually plays, then that means there's going to be 3 because McCurry and Dara Canavan probably didn't set the world alight, but they'll still have to be marked. So you're imagining that Jason Foley and Paul Murphy will be tagging those 2, but if they throw McElhone into the mix, then that's another problem for Kerry that they'll have to figure out themselves as well.
Would it concern you? Go on, Ciarán, sorry.
I was just going to say, Jacqui, just getting back to that kick out, and I think it's extremely difficult for the keepers now in the modern rules because everybody is outside that arc. You have kind of 11-man press between that halfway line and that arc. We spoke with getting those kickouts away and getting that possession, but it's very, very hard. Like if you look at, Conor Gleeson was caught, Shane Ryan was caught in Armagh goal. The keepers, it's high risk strategy in terms of going short. It can cost the best of keepers a goal. I do think that Morgan and like Morgan has been caught. They've all been caught. Morgan is a little bit more patient, I think, on his kickouts. I think he can be a little bit slower and he waits for the runner. Tyrone go for that bunch and break and he waits for that runner, and if he doesn't see a good option, he tends then to kind of go long, and he has that long one in his locker, whether it's down to Brian Kennedy over the halfway line. They use that 3 or 4 times against Dublin. So I think he'd be a little bit more patient, and he's going to be aware of obviously that press as well. He's going to realise that Kerry are going to go for that 3-4-3, 3-4-3 press or whatever it is across the middle, which they were very aggressive on. So I just think that dynamic is going to be interesting from a Tyrone perspective in terms of gaining possession, and then just in relation to the man-on-man approach and defensively, as we said, they're going to tag them. A lot of people spoke about Dublin and their lack of 2-point scores in the quarterfinal, and that threat wasn't there all year. And okay, it wasn't there all year, but that didn't mean that Dublin didn't have players that were capable of kicking 2-pointers. And I think if you look at that Tyrone defensive system against Dublin, they were very focused on ensuring they had Bugler watched, they had Kilkenny watched, and when Con came in, Hampsey was very, very close to him. They were much more aware when the likes of Merchant and Keane Murphy brought the ball up the field. You'd see McGreary dropping into the pocket as kind of that +1. And they're kind of, well, they're not dangerous from outside the arc. I thought they were much better drilled in terms of where the threats were coming from the defensive perspective. And Kieran McGeary then plays that kind of, he's the one that will leave his man if he sees a double team opportunity. If he sees somebody getting a press on, he's out straight away, and he's back playing great football. And I think similar, Matty Donnelly up the other end sets the tempo. I think they're the two that set the tempo from Tyrone. And Tyrone it has to be 2003-esque to a certain degree in terms of that level of intensity, and they've got to rattle Kerry and do total opposite of what Armagh do. If they do that, I think it gives them an opportunity.
One last question on them, Wheelo, that I was going to ask you there is just on that form that Tomás raises about McCurry and Canavan, the fact that they haven't quite hit the heights that maybe people might have expected. Would that concern you going into a game where you know at the other end of the field that Sean Shea, David Clifford, Paul Gainey, if he plays, that they are going to rack up a serious score, and that maybe if this is going to become sort of a shoot for shoot, that they really need to be on it? Would you have concerns that maybe they haven't been in the last couple?
Absolutely. Like you feel the ability is there. And as Tomás said, well, they start on Mackham home. Certainly their bench made a massive impact against Dublin. McDonald came in, Rory Canavan came in, and I tell you, they were fairly lively as in that second half. They were pulling the Dublin defence. In the last 15 minutes, they made a significant impact. They gave the Dublin full back line a lot of hassle. The matchups are critical, really. On both sides, as we know, who takes who, and from a Kerry perspective, Tom Sullivan's obviously out, Tomás, I think, isn't he? So who takes Dara Canavan? Jason Foley took him in the league match. Now Canavan.
Yeah, it'll be Jason Foley. Paul Murphy will take. Yeah. I would say will take Canavan and McCurry. But if they play the likes of McElhone, then Kerry, it'll probably be Dylan Casey that will have to pick him up.
Yeah, Dylan Casey, yeah. So the matchups are going to be critical. But while the lads might be quiet, they can both explode into life. Jacqui, they're not. I'm not saying that they're not confidence players. That that they don't need. They're quality players. You know what I mean? They're not. You're not waiting. They're going to be. Canavan's going to be everywhere. He's going to be trying to create problems. I think he took a bit of confidence out of that last quarter against Dublin. And McCurry can just explode into life. And he would be danger coming on that arc and looking for the 2-pointers. Likewise with Peter Hart, who was allowed to saunter up the pitch against Dublin and pick 2-pointers. So yeah, the matchups are hugely important. But those lads, for Tyrone to, I suppose, to really rattle Kerry and have a chance of winning, they've got to get their kickouts right. They've got to get their tag the key Kerry players and got playing that man-to-man game and pushing out. It's going to probably let Kerry execute their kicking game. It's going to leave Clifford back inside. It's risk reward really. You're trying to cut off one threat, but you are opening up another threat. And if Kerry get that space and they're able to execute that kicking game, and David Clifford is able to stay in close to goal because Tyrone are pushing out, that's the risk that you're going to take. Who picks up David Clifford is going to be interesting in my view. Hampsey, you would expect. Peter Teague took him in the league game. Clifford scored 3-3, but he actually didn't do too bad on him because two of the points were from frees. That the goals kind of Clifford got on the end of moves. But he actually didn't, in terms of the number of possessions, he kind of limited. He didn't have that bad a game on him. But that's when you're marking somebody like David Clifford, you have to accept he's going to get a certain amount of scores. So the matchups, I think, are that's one of the big changes in the game. I think last few years we spoke about matchups, but it was all very much zonal and collective, and you didn't really see, one-to-one battles. They are now an essential part of the game. This weekend and into the final, players that are having a massive influence, if they can be tagged, if their influence can be limited, it will play a big role in who goes to down the line and winning.
Is that one kind of slightly, go on, Tomás, sorry.
No.
Okay. I was going to say, is that one kind of slightly different to the Donegal Meath game? Because if Kerry-Tyrone is all about those specific individual matchups, is the way that Donegal set up in that sort of zone formation where they slip in and out of a man and then back into a zone, the way that they break, does that become a very different game against Meath, who are a brilliant running team as well, Tomás, and maybe it's all about what the collective do as opposed to what the individuals do?
Yeah, I think Donegal, I've seen Donegal in the flesh a few times this year. At the last game, the quarter-final, the first ball they got actually at the start of the game, I was just wondering what they're going to do. They lamped it. They lamped the ball into the full forward line. And I says, Jesus, are they going to change this up here now? They didn't. They didn't change it. They went back to normal and they ran it. I think they'll run it, Jacqui, but I think more so they will not want Meath, I would imagine, to get an early foothold. I think Meath have absolutely nothing to lose. They play without fear. They defend as well as any of the last four defend. They just are aggressive. They have their man-to-man markers, 1 or 2 or 3 of them, but they also defend collectively really, really aggressively. They will kick the ball if they can, but they also have runners and they will shoot and be very direct. Like it happened in the first half against Galway, where you were saying, yeah, they're creating chances, they're going at it, but they're just not scoring. And they didn't really change it. I don't know who was interviewed after the match said they didn't really change it. They said, back yourselves, keep doing what you're doing. But they came off, the scores came off in the second half, and I suppose that was the difference in the end, and they showed a bit of character when Galway had came back at them. But I think Donegal will try to shut down shop more so than they've had. They've had 2 weeks. Donegal were bang, bang, bang every week. Jim was playing the tune above. But they've had 2 weeks now to actually prepare properly, to tighten up and to smarten themselves in their attacking game, but more so, I would say, their defensive game. They don't want Meath. Meath are a confidence team anyway, and Meath will have a go. And that's not being disrespectful. I think they've been outstanding. You talk about Louth and them being Leinster Championship winners, and a lot of Meath people would like to swap that. But I guarantee you look back over it after the season, and you'll say, who are in a better place for next year going forward? It's probably Meath. Meath are just playing with such confidence. But I think Donegal will probably focus in on trying to stifle them to such a degree that they might take from their own attacking game. Donegal, I don't know what game it was. Donegal hate playing stupid ball and hitting stupid shots, and I'd say getting turned over. They're absolutely livid because their game takes so much energy. That running game takes so much energy. If you're going to be taking silly shots, if you're going to be giving silly hand passes, you're absolutely killing the team, and it's up and down the pitch, which they don't want. They want to be in control. Therefore, to be in control, you have to control the back. So I'd expect Donegal to be really, really tight and knuckling in to Meath in the early first 10, 15, 20 minutes.
They've done that job time and time again, Ciarán, and it's got them to this position as it did last year. You just wonder how many lessons have they learned to be able to get that step further and take that game up another level where they can genuinely feel, okay, we're ready to win an All-Ireland now, because people see it there. You know, every metric tells you this team are going to get there. Just, are they ready now?
Yeah, and certainly they have the ability, and probably one of the key players they didn't have last year, Michael Murphy.
Yeah.
You know, have him now, and his influence throughout the year has been unbelievable. Like from a Meath perspective, like it's a very, very interesting game, Jacqui. You know, that Meath are absolutely full of confidence, and when you reflect back on that Galway game, I kind of watched it. I was more kind of maybe critical of Galway's lack of leadership and Galway's, you know, only playing when they were forced to play. They were stumbling all year. But, you know, when I was away for it, but when you look back and watch the video, Meath were excellent. And it was that level of intensity and that chaos that they brought, you know, particularly their work rate was off the charts, and the confidence that has been bred into these players in terms of their development. They're 2 inches taller, they're 2 inches wider, they're working so hard for each other, and they want to bring that level of intensity out, particularly out the field, to try and stop Donegal's flow and stop Donegal controlling the game. Donegal love a game of control. They carry the ball up the field. As Tomás said, they're not using that kick pass. I think they will. I think we saw in the Ulster final, it's there in their locker. I think they're going to use it at some stage when they have to. I think that's coming. I genuinely do. I think that's part of the game that I think they possibly hold them back. But Meath's raw intensity was fantastic against Galway, married with the ability in their forward line. But I suppose the two challenges I see for Meath at the weekend is that, you know, Brendan McCole is definitely going to do a job, and Jody Morris, he's going to be very, very tight to him, and Jody Morris is going to have to play like Donegal are going to be ready for him to try, going to take them on. They're going to try and draw him into pockets and get a second and third man and force turnovers, and Meath have to be very careful of that, because that's what Donegal thrive off. They'll probably have Kieran Moore maybe on Matthew Costello. They'll, you know, the way Donegal kind of set up, while they do drop back into that kind of zone of defence, they do pinpoint 2 or 3 lads, and they will tag them and mark them and stop their influence. So if Meath can be very accurate, reduce those number of turnovers, you know, it gives them a chance. But it's Donegal's raw pace in that middle 8. They're the number of, you know, you saw that Galway goal where John Marr came down the middle, the runner came from deep. Donegal are going to, you know, that middle 8, the power they have coming from the half back line, McHugh, Mogan, Ombon, Langan. Like Langan to me is Brian Fenton-esque in terms of, he's so comfortable in possession. He's such a skilled footballer and makes the game look very easy. That power of the middle eight and that running game, the fact that Meath kind of do press out and put pressure on it, I think Donegal could open them up. And that would be the biggest risk I see from a Meath perspective. And Donegal's options, that second half against Monaghan, they're so dangerous. There's so many danger players that can kick scores. And if they get a rhythm, their line running up front, the angles they come at, how they pull defenders out of positions to open up pockets is top drawer. They're extremely well coached, and that's where I feel, as Tomás said, they're going to be fresh, they're going to be ready, and that's going to be Meath's challenge to try and curb that influence and put pressure on them out the field.
What about Meath then, Tomás? Because I think there's two kind of schools of thought on it. One is, if you're Robbie Brennan, you use the momentum of everybody's not giving you a chance here, everybody's calling it a free shot and that kind of thing, which is kind of mad in an All-Ireland semi-final. And then they've beaten Kerry. People said Kerry were slightly off. They beat Dublin. People said Dublin were slightly off. They've beaten Galway, and people said, oh, Galway didn't really fire either. And so if you're using it as motivation, you're saying, well, what more do we need to do? But also maybe he's kind of happy that they're flying under the radar this weekend. You put your coaching hat on. What are you seeing from his point of view?
Yeah, I don't, Jacqui, I can't. I tried to figure it out there during the week. I don't know what's gone on in Meath the last number of years. Like, how can they suddenly be properly and really deserving of being in an All-Ireland semi-final, yet everybody's judging Meath on what's been there for the last number of years, and what's been there the last number of years has been nothing in terms of what we're seeing right now, even though they've had the same players. They were playing with a lack of confidence. They weren't threatening. I know the rules changed. That could have added to it. Robbie Brennan is obviously after adding so much to it, but the players themselves are playing with a confidence. We all know that it's a huge county, and I heard one of their players being interviewed during the week, and half of them can't remember. Some of them weren't alive when Meath were winning the All-Irelands last time out. They just want to play. You can sense the support is back in Meath. You can sense there's issues. Like, it's great to see there's issues in Meath for an All-Ireland semi-final. That buzz is there. But I think it would suit. I think it does. I don't think everybody looks at it and says, I've seen a number of people, for example, tipping Meath for this weekend. And like, it is, you can say that, geez, that's a crazy idea. You can say that because everybody, and I'd say everybody, thought that Galway would turn Meath over. Yet the most satisfying area of that game, I'd say, for Robbie Brennan was when Galway bounced back in that second half, and when they got their goal and got their few scores, tagged it on. Meath show the character, so they're constant. They don't care. I'd say they're not listening to outside noise anyway, Jacqui, which is proper. There's one area I think that'll be interesting, and I think if Robbie Brennan's looking at it, if Kerry were able to do to Rafferty, why not? Why would Meath not be able to go after Patton? And I know there's a danger with his long kick out. But why can't you be organised under a long kick out? Why can't you, right, we're going to get him forced long. If we win that ball, we're going to move it as quickly, whether it's carrying the ball or whether there's an option inside that we can kick it to, we'll do that. But number one, we have to win the long ball. However, if we lose that long ball, we'll still be in a position where our two wing forwards, for example, will be tucked in like two wing backs, and our two wing backs will cover if there is. I think it would be a mistake by Meath to show Donegal too much respect and fear what Patton can actually do. Patton will bomb it long, but it's not a given that now, don't get me wrong, I know that Donegal have cut through teams. They did it to Derry a number of years ago where they absolutely destroyed them. They still seem to be getting this flick off on. But I definitely think it would be a mistake on Meath's part to invite and give Patton the short one off and allow Donegal build from the back. I would go after them. I know they can't do it for the full game, but through periods of that game, I would go after them because, yes, they do have big men around the middle of the field. But if you look at what Meath brought on Conor Gray in the second half, but Menton, O'Neill, they have huge men around Conor Duke. They have huge men around the middle of the park, and it's like there's players, Dublin, O'Cuffig, Byrne. There's players now in vogue because of the new rules and because it's driven out. It's not really only the goalie anymore. It's the goalie, it's the big man in the middle of the field, and if he doesn't catch it, it's the half forward or the half back scooping in for breaks. It's like the old days. So it isn't any one man that's dictating things, but I think that middle of the park is absolutely key for Meath. I know it's an easy thing because we said the same about the last game. There are other parts of it, but for Meath, I think that's probably the most important part, is to go after Patton.
Tomás, you're right on that in terms of, Meath they've been brilliant under that kind of breaking ball, particularly Dublin, Kerry. That's been one of their strengths on the long kickouts. And like I see Meath, Jacqui, and I really see an imprint of the old Meath in them. I really do. Their attitude defensively, their intensity in the tackle, their work rate, their cover for each other, and midfield. Even the last day against Galway, the amount of they've actually, you can see it. Like Sean Rafferty was going up for balls, Coffey was going up for balls, Conor Gray was going Menton. They're actually using the fist, punching the ball, breaking it back in the direction of the opposition half and winning breaks. An old type with something we really haven't seen in the game, for a good few years. That old getting up and making sure the opposition midfielder doesn't win it, and you're putting a strong hand on it and you're getting it. And they've swept up numerous breaks, and it's definitely kind of something they've worked on. And then their kicking game, when they're winning clean possession, their first instinct is get up, kick. And they've done that very effectively against Galway. That's how they got in behind them. So that will be, if they can get some sort of, if they can force long kickouts, if they can get a platform and pick up those breaks around the middle, if they can get at Donegal before they get their shape and get their structure defensively, that would be their best opportunity for potentially opening up with the forwards that they have.
Oh, lads, I think that's going to be fascinating. I really do. Two very different All-Ireland semi-finals, but two really intriguing ones to call. We'll finish off, lads, on the Tailteann Cup. And I think the opportunity for both sides here, Tomás, Kildare to sort of get this done and get back to where people expect that they belong. But for Limerick to be, I don't want to call them the fairy tale story of the year, but that does genuinely feel kind of the way it is. They've already obviously won in Croke Park. They've played in Croke Park more than their hurlers this year. The feel-good factor around Limerick football is there probably whether they win this competition or not. But I suspect for them, they're going to be going after this hammer and tongue because it would be a phenomenal achievement to go and win this thing.
Of course it would, Jacqui, and I think you'd still hear it. I know there's no Tailteann Cup semi-final or final on its own going to fill out Croke Park, but that's not the point. The point was there was need of a second-tier competition. They need to go after it. You look, Meath won it a couple of years ago, and you look where they come. Westmeath won it a couple of years ago. They are hovering around. Now, Meath probably have made more inroad than Westmeath did, but it is a huge stepping stone, and I don't care what anybody says. I would not take it. I would not take it out of Croke Park. I would give it. I think the big one altogether is the fact that it secures All-Ireland football for you the following year. That's the big one. But for Kildare, there was an expectation on them. There was an expectation on Flanagan to get Kildare back. And I think they've dealt with that pressure in a way because there are good enough teams. You could easily have got caught with it. So he's got them to where they need to be. And if they win that, I don't think they'll be elated altogether. But at least it's a stepping stone to where they're going. But the other argument then is they are where they are because that's the level that they're at right now. But for Limerick, Jacqui, to come from Division 4 to get where they are, I think is a phenomenal achievement. I think Billy Lee has done absolutely huge work with them to work with their confidence, their identity. They're in a hurling county, a county that has done so well with hurling the last number of years. I think they were on TV the last day. They were on TV. They'll be on TV this Saturday as well. I think it's doing wonders for the world of football in Limerick. And Limerick, despite the strength of hurling within the county, There's huge football people in Limerick. There's huge football clubs in Limerick that take it so seriously, and it's great that they're getting, now it mightn't be the All-Ireland series, but they're getting huge coverage with it. And that's off the field, Jacqui. I think the impact it's having off the field. But on the field, sure, why would Limerick fear what's in front of them? Kildare are after coming through a semi-final against Fermanagh, and for long periods of that game now, Kildare should have had them blown off the map. They missed so much in that game. So Limerick will obviously come with an attitude, you frustrate these fellas, they might, and this is what Kildare have to focus in on, if you frustrate them often enough and long enough, that they might implode and panic, and we might have a chance the other side. It is loaded on one side towards Kildare, but Limerick will have and again, we'll make the argument, they have what you need in the middle of the park. They have their big men around the middle of the park. They work it well. They're fast on the ball as well. They have pace around the middle. So Limerick won't fear it, and they have a gung-ho approach. But I would say that they're thoroughly enjoying the build-up. I've seen interviews there online, press nights. They're back. The hurlers are gone, so they're back in Páirc na Gael, which is great to see as well. And I think it's going to be a huge occasion. I can't say it's going to be a cracker, but I think it's going to be a huge occasion.
Yeah. Doesn't need to be a cracker though, Wheelo, because of the stakes that are on the line for either side, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about winning, Jacqui. And Tomás touched on something there. It's, from Limerick's perspective, if they can force Kildare into panic, and that's in the Kildare locker, and you saw the Kildare earlier on in the year when I saw them against Louth, you're thinking, yeah, they're making great progress, and they were, kicking the ball away from, maybe progressing in the Leinster Championship and doing very well under Brian Flanagan. But he touched on something after the last game in his interview, was the Croke Park factor. And Kildare have had so many bad days in Croke Park over the last few years. It's been a bad place for them. Lost the league final there, taking a fair few hammerings. For their experienced players, that can psychologically just seep in there. And there was that edginess about them the last day. The conditions were poor, but when you look at things on paper and you're looking at some of the quality players that Kildare have up front, like Alex Byrne has been flying, Daniel Flynn, Kirwan, Sinky, they've introduced a good few of the young under 20 players. You would expect that if Kildare settle, if they get enough possession and if they get their confidence going, that they will have too much quality for Limerick. But Limerick will thrive on that, rattle them. These guys, are not comfortable here. They're not performing here. Force them into those errors, poor shots, get into their headspace, and then they have an opportunity. They just have to stop Kildare getting on that blow. Kildare, to me, are a confidence team. A lot of their players are a confidence team. If they start well, they could have too much for them. Because I think we have to be realistically look at the even paths to the final. Limerick they're in bonus territory. They've been phenomenal, but probably had an easier path. Did a brilliant win against Westmeath, 1 point win against Westmeath. That was probably that injected them into a good position on that side of the draw. But Kildare have probably beaten better teams, and you would expect that if Kildare perform, they win. And Kildare have to win. That's the other thing, Jack. Like this is a game that, for Kildare's progression, they're standing back and they're looking at Louths and they're looking at the Meaths of this world, and they're saying, are we going to close that gap? It's not so long ago when we were up in Division 1, 2, 3 years ago. They have to start showing the same signs of progression that Meath have. So for me, it's about Kildare have to perform and have to win. Otherwise, it's they're still in that ether of doubts hanging over them if they don't perform.
Yeah, well, we will see opportunity knocks for everybody this weekend. Lads, we'll leave it there. Ciarán, Tomás, thanks a million for being with us. To everybody, enjoy your football weekend. We'll be back on Monday to review it all. Don't forget to like and follow wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll talk to you soon.
Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point.